Hi, welcome to this presentation on game development in the cloud. I'm going to walk you through a couple of slides here, and then we've got a demo to show you. I would like to start by introducing myself and my colleague. My colleague is Chris Finch. He's a very talented senior worldwide specialist solution architect here at the Game Tech team. My name is Stephen Peacock. I'm Principal Tech BD for the Game Tech team. And Chris and I have been very focused on game production in the cloud this year. It's actually an initiative that's been going for a while now, but really got a lot more intense conversations around this in the last 6 to 9 months, especially given the current state of things. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about game production in the cloud, distributed game production, but this is really about how game production is going to change in the long run, not a particular focus on any short-term requirements we might have due to the current status. So today, prior to COVID, very few teams were actually being built all in one office. Most large publishers had multiple studios collaborating on a title. Smaller publishers would have external resources, perhaps smaller satellite studios, and small indie teams would have work from home employees or freelancers collaborating on a project. So at almost all levels of game production, there was some element of distributed workload happening, and over time that has become more challenging. And one of the main reasons for that is that the infrastructure needs of building a game, the size of the kit that a developer needs under their desk, access to specialist hardware, has essentially meant that there is a lot of hardware investment put into a building so that people can do their work, which makes it very hard for them to do their work from home in a lot of cases, because that's not where the specialist equipment is. So a lot of studio-centric infrastructure, which really made working in a distributed fashion quite challenging, even if you were just trying to have 2 or 3 teams in 2 or 3 physical locations collaborating. And so what, traditionally AAA has been done behind closed doors. There's a lot of secure IP security that has to be kept in mind. There's also a lot of IT security. So the machines are under contract. They're very secured machines. There's legal contracts requiring where some of those machines might be, especially the end user devices. Then you've got expensive hardware that's been purchased for the artists and programmers to work on, and all of that equipment has very valuable IP on it. So a lot of points of security risk. And when everyone had to go home at sort of near the beginning of this year, people sent their teams home for the large part with their equipment, but that really created a very large security risk. Solved the immediate problem, and depending on where you live, it was a relatively short-term requirement, and people have started to go back to the offices around the world, but definitely it created a security risk having all of this valuable hardware with valuable IP on it distributed throughout everyone's home environment. And so one of the things that I think that we're seeing happened is that as employees started to work from home, something that they'd not done before a lot in the games industry, there was a couple of findings that came out relatively quickly. First one was that employees were surprised at how productive they were. I think if questioned before having to go home, a lot of them would have said that the team collaboration, being close to their team members physically, was critical to them being productive. A lot of them found that it wasn't as critical as they had thought, that they could communicate very, very effectively over digital means to stay in collaboration with their colleagues. Their leaders found that there was not as much disruption as they had anticipated. Some reported actually a productivity boost, Over time, it seems that it's maybe equalizing so that the productivity is about the same. We're definitely seeing that that's not the same story in every department for every stage of game production, but for a lot of production, we're hearing that there's been minimal impact to general productivity. And then the other thing that has, really come to the fore is that game developers, the production team, has experienced the work from home flexibility that they've, in a lot of cases, never experienced before, and that has allowed them to build a much better work-life harmony. I mean, it's something that a lot of them have said that they are very keen to maintain, even when it is safe for us all to go back to the offices. So in surveys that we've seen and in surveys that we've done with our user group, the general consensus seems to be somewhere around 30% of production hours will be done from home. That's not to say that 30% of your employees are just never going to come into the office. Many of them want to come into the office, is what we're hearing, but maybe only for 3 or 4 days a week, and they want the freedom to be able to work from home on the other days to be just as productive from home. And so enabling that environment where your employees are freer to choose whether they're going to do their work in the office or at home today is going to require a shift in the way game development was traditionally done. So what's really driving this then is, as the staff are realizing this, there's a couple of other things that we're seeing happening. What we're hearing from hiring departments is that now that they're freed from the 30-mile limitation of hiring around their studio and they're able to hire people from much further away, they're finding it much easier to attract and retain talent who's able, as that talent is able to also move more than 30 miles away from the office, so to speak. Then so that moving, that freedom to not immediately move or not have to go into the office every day allows people to perhaps live a bit further away from the studio or a lot further away from the studio, which again is great for the employees to have that freedom. And for employees that have external commitments, perhaps single parents who have to pick up kids at a certain time in the afternoon, who would be very willing to be able to work from home for a couple more hours in the afternoon, but they need that ability to leave the office. This more flexible production environment is allowing them to fit work into their life in a more harmonic way so that they can both work with the family commitments that they have and that they want to do, but also have the ability to put in the hours that they also want to put in on the projects that they're passionate about. We're seeing a couple of different models that people are looking at. I think there's the traditional model that we're all familiar with. Everyone goes into the office for 40 plus hours a week to sit next to the infrastructure and get the game built. There's still going to be times when that makes sense, at particular stages of production, perhaps, or for particular types of projects. Flex time is, I think, what we've been talking about a little bit here, where customers are able to provide to their workforce the ability to work from home for certain periods of the week. Hybrid takes it a step further, where you have employees who are much further afield and never come into the office. So you have that mix of a mostly local workforce that's doing flex time, and then a portion of the workforce that's really remote. And then there are a couple of teams and a couple of studios that we've, even before COVID, that were 100% virtual. Definitely a lot of teams are looking at that, but I would say that for many, there's still a question mark about whether 100% virtual is really manageable right now. And it's less about the technology, it's more about, do people want to actually work remote all the time, or do people prefer to come into the office and have that collaboration time, meet with colleagues, spend time with colleagues, especially in a creative endeavor like game development. A lot of people that we interviewed, like I said, they don't want to be 5 days a week away from the office, but they are thinking 3 or 4. days in the office or 3 or 4 days out of the office, but they want that colleague time. So virtual is still a question mark. It's possible. There are studios doing it, but it's not the end goal for most of the customers that we're talking to. So the way we think about game production, when we look at how game production could possibly be done in the cloud, there are three main blocks of work that we see need to be tackled. There's content creation, which is the requirement for artists and programmers to have access to enough compute power and resources to create the content in the first place. There's a development pipeline, the ability to do source control, build farms, and a full sort of CI/CD pipeline. How can that move into the cloud and take advantage of horizontal scaling resources to speed up builds and to build a lot of redundancy into that process? And then the final one is, at the end of the loop, how do we play the game? How do we test the game in a remote environment? And quite honestly, that is definitely the most challenging, especially in games where we have a lot of specialty devices, target devices that we have to play the game on. And given the performant nature of the products that we build. So that's definitely the hardest of the three to solve. But I think you'll see a bit later, we're doing some work in that direction. So to break those down a little bit further, if we focus at content creation for a minute. So there are a couple of different solutions we use for content creation. So we have our EC2 G4, which is a graphics, a powerful graphics instance that's available on AWS. We're partnered with Teradici, who have one of the leading streaming solutions. Teradici is a favorite in the media and entertainment space because it's put a lot of work into, say, the color correctness of the stream. They've also put a lot of work into making sure that the end user input devices are very, very performant. Wacom tablets, mice, pens, all those kind of things are very performant with Teradici. We also have an internal solution called Nice DCV, which is free if used on EC2. We're continuing to work on Nice. It has some very nice features that people do like. And then the final one is Parsec, which is another partner of ours. They have a solution that was originally built for actually game streaming, for people to play games from remote infrastructure. It's proved very popular in the development space, especially for play testing, because it has a feature that allows one person to play and multiple people to watch the same stream and interact with, and talk to the person playing the game. So great for those sort of daily game run-throughs and stuff. Nice also has some of that functionality. What we like to stress is that we don't have any particular favorite. We're very passionate about making sure that you have the right streaming solution for what your need is. And what we're seeing is that teams tend to not just pick one for the whole team. They might mix and match different solutions for different workloads, for different needs. Testing, people might be using Parsec while the color graders are using Teradici, things like that. So it can very much depend on what work you're actually doing. But what you'll see in the demo in a little bit, and Chris will be first to say he was a skeptic, is that streaming these G4 instances to a work desk and having two 2K screens and being able to work on a large app like Unity or something, or Unreal Engine or Maya, Max, Houdini, it's very performant and it's a very pleasant environment for artists to work on. The benefit, of course, is that all of your data stays in the cloud. It never leaves. There's a temporary stream. So for the person working at home, when they switch off their machine, the machine is a lightweight machine and there's no IP on it. So from a security point of view, this is a very safe way to do content creation. On the development pipeline side of things, so Perforce is the dominant, seems to be the dominant, the most popular tool being used for source control in the industry. We've partnered with Perforce and worked with them to build a solution that makes it quite easy for people to stand up a Perforce server in AWS. We're also working with Incredibuild, which is another popular solution in the games industry. But beyond that, of course, we also have solutions for managing Git, if you'd prefer to go with Git or Git Enterprise. And there are other solutions that do similar work to Incredibuild, and we're also looking to support those. But Perforce and Incredibuild in our research were some of the most popular tools that we saw in the development pipeline. Jenkins as well shows up. And so we've been working hard to help customers migrate their Perforce servers, their Incredibuild systems, and their Jenkins servers and things into the cloud. And by keeping all of those assets in the cloud, it allows for much more horizontal access to capacity, so builds happen faster, but it also makes it easier to distribute those builds. We have a partnership with Nasuni, who has a great solution for helping distribute large assets like build assets, daily build assets across multiple studios globally. So lots of great stuff happening on the development tool pipeline. And then finally on the QA, if it's a PC first game, obviously you can test the game on a G4, and we have a range of different G4s. So it's also possible to do some level of compatibility testing with slower machines or faster machines and see that. We also have AWS Device Farm for mobile developers. This is a physical range of mobile devices that you access remotely through the cloud, so you can run batch tests on it. The performance is not really there to play interactive games, especially fast-paced ones, but potentially for puzzle games you could do interactive testing. What it's primarily being used for by our games customers is actually more automated testing and batchable testing. Still important for the CI/CD pipeline, but a great resource for mobile developers because getting all of the devices to all of the testers, can be very inefficient. The console dev and test kits are much more of a challenge. There's both technical and legal limitations as to what can be done with those, as most developers who develop on them are aware. And so we're looking for different ways that we might be able to empower console development. One of the early options that we're exploring with a couple of studios right now that looks very promising is our Outpost system. This essentially allows you to install an AWS rack either in your studio or in a data center near you, a colo. And so what this would allow, let's say you're developing Xbox, PlayStation game, and you have a bunch of dev kits for both flavors of dev kits, test kits, and you wanted to rack them centrally in your studio now or in a colo. What you could do is put an Outpost rack next to them, and so they would essentially be connected to the EC2 instances in that Outpost rack. So for anyone either inside the physical studio or outside the studio, it would look to them, as far as their control plane and how they work with those devices, it would look as if those devices had been put into the region, because the Outpost essentially creates a private mini region for you. So from your AWS environment, it would look like you had those dev kits in your mini region. And that's something that we're working with a couple of studios. We know that there are studios out there who've already started to rack their dev kits in colos so that remote staff and remote studios can have faster access to them. And so that's something that we're trying to look if we can support. That's the end of the slideshow. At this point, I'd like to click it over to Chris, who will give you a run through of what we've built so far as a demo.
Awesome. So, my name is Chris Finch, and thank you very much, Stephen. I was, in fact, a skeptic. We joke about a couple of things, that being one of them. The other one being he has actually taken all of my really cool talking points from this part of the presentation, so I don't actually have a heck of a lot to say, but I will cover as much as I can here. This is a very, very simple workflow here. What we're looking at is a developer who is working on via a Teradata client, which Stephen mentioned earlier. That's one of the ways to have a connection directly to a virtual workstation, right? They use the Teradici client to talk to a G4 GN4 XL, which is a really good workstation for an artist to use. They communicate with, in this case, we have used Perforce. Don't take that as gospel. We understand there's a lot of variability in the industry right now. We've implemented Perforce because a lot of folks use it, but that's not the only solution. That can be, and actually, you know what? I want to back up a second. That's one of the key things I want to call out here when we're talking about this virtual workflow, is that many of these things, if not all of them, are actually very, very non-specific, right? You know, we talked about Teradici. Teradici is great if you want to have really, really snappy input, right? It talks straight to your USB. It takes over your USB driver, and it gives you a great way to input, when you're doing your level design or you're doing your artwork, and it feels like you're right there on the box. You don't have to use Teradici. You can use Nice DCCD, which, as Stephen mentioned, is free for use on EC2. That gives you a slightly different experience. It's not quite as responsive, but it is free for use on EC2. It is still pretty darned responsive, and it does have the ability to, you can bring someone else along to watch your stream at the same time, which is pretty awesome. And there's also Parsec, as Stephen mentioned, which was, originally it's a streamer program. So you can have a bunch of people watching at the same time as someone else is working. So that's actually a really good solution for QA. So don't feel like any one of these things is like set in stone. We've got, easy solutions to bring these things up, but we are constantly improving on that and constantly bringing more of these things up and running. So where we see Teradici, you'll be able to spin up Nice DCV. You'll be able to spin up Parsec. Where you see AWS, the Perforce stack, you'll be able to spin up GitHub Enterprise or GitHub just as easily, right? That's the whole idea behind this. It's not a set way of doing things. It's a new way of doing things. That new way has to consist of all the different kind of components that you would be using as your studio to put it together. So yeah, don't feel like we're trying to hand you in here, okay? Developers working on Teradici. He's going through the G440N, pulling code from the Perforce stack. And then what we don't actually have in this demo, and what I'm sure a lot of you are going to be interested in, is the build process. And again, that's there's a bunch of reasons for that. One of them is because there's only so much time in the demo, and a build can be easily the most boring part of the demo, especially if it's a large demo build. There are lots of mechanisms to do that you can engage in here. We have a couple. We have a partner who is Incredibuild, who we're working with to include in this pipeline. Who you can push the button in UE4, and off it goes to build in your cluster in Incredibuild, and boom, you're done. Same thing with light mapping in UE4. Same thing, with Unity, whatever your engine is. Incredibuild can do that. There's also a free product called FastBuild, which does a very similar job, except it's open source, and that can be inserted into this process as well. And by the same token, if you have a large team, then you can have a Jenkins or a Bamboo work automation CI/CD pipeline also served in this stack as well, and they can all work together in concert. We're not going to go through all those details here, but those are all parts of the puzzle, right? And they are all interchangeable. There's none of these are exclusive to each other. I just wanted to call that out because it's kind of important. What we'll do during the demo is we'll work on a UE4 level. We'll play with it. We'll make a couple of changes. We'll do a local build. What we'll then do is we'll drop it into an S3 bucket, which is fronted by CloudFormation to show you how quickly you can make the changes. Once you're done with the changes and you've done your build, you can make it available to your gamers like that fast, right? The other thing I wanted to call out quick is that the other thing that the G4 will be doing is it'll be piping the stream through Amazon Interactive Video Service, which is, again, that's why we're actually going to pop you over to the URL as opposed to making you watch it here in Connect. It should provide a smoother experience. Something I do want to call out as well, when you see me working, you're going to see me playing around. I'm not going to harp on it because you're going to see it yourself. But I'm actually 400 miles from my AWS region from where this workstation is being hosted. So for me to, be playing around, just enjoying the experience, making changes, hopping up and down like you do when you're playing in your level, trying to figure out if you like it or not. I find myself doing that anyway. Even as good as this video stream is going to be, it's not as good as what I'm doing. If this interests you at all, be a skeptic. I was skeptical when I saw the videos myself. Be a skeptic, but ask for a demo. Because when you actually get it in your hands, that's when you're going to say, okay, wait a minute. I've built levels and I've done art, and you know what? This is fine. This works actually really, really well. I'm not seeing a heck of a lot of difference between what I'm doing on my box here and what I'd be doing on, and what I'd be doing if I had it at my feet, right? There's very, very little differentiation. So there's a couple. So I'm currently, what you're looking at is me tunneling into a Teradicci box into a G440N, G4DN4XL EC2 using the Teradicci client. This is the live stream from that EC2 currently. It's not from my desktop; it's straight from the EC2. So one of the things that's nice about using Teradicci is that it actually gives you a lot of ways to understand how well you're going to be able to interact with the server that you're interacting with. And I'm actually going to do that. We can review this at the end. You basically attach the localhost, and what it does is it starts to run some really interesting statistics, like how many packets have I dropped, how is my screen quality looking. There's a number of things, how many packets I've, bytes received, bytes sent, et cetera, and this will be more useful as we kind of go through. But this gives you an idea not only of what you're looking at for this specific demo, but if you start to say, hey, I want to roll this out to some folks in my studio, they can then start to get an idea of what this looks like, what performance looks like for them, and have some actual metrics and numbers behind it, right? And that's kind of important because this is not necessarily going to be a solution for everyone in every remote area ever, right? I'm getting great performance. I'm 400 miles away. There may be someone who's 200 miles away but in a really bad internet area and doesn't get this kind of performance. So that may not be a solution for them. But this gives you a way to definitively find out where this is going to work for them. So that's kind of important. Right. So the other thing I want to do right here is I'm going to pop into the workspace in Perforce. This is a Perforce stack that we have running in the cloud. Just to be clear, the way we have it right now, this is all currently in the same account, so that way it's very easy to set up and run for you guys. This would be very easy, of course, using VPC peering to have your code repository in one account, your virtual workstations in another account. That way you've got proper network isolation, right? So just wanted to call that out. I'll be popping back to this briefly so that way you can see that things are being checked out and in. And so what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to go straight to the main event, and here we go. Okay, so what we have now, okay, I'm having, it's a little crunchy right now, a bit unusual. I think it's going to, there we go. Okay. All right, we're all smoothed out now. Very nice. Sometimes when you've had the thing running and it's gone away, it's like, oh, I can relax. It is actually the Teradicci client does a really good job of figuring out a bunch of things on the fly. One of the reasons it's really neat, one of the things you actually won't see here during the demo is that it's actually color corrected and it's lossless, right? You're not going to see it on video because obviously just for the stream it's getting compressed. So it does all sorts of cool tricks behind the scenes to make that happen for me while I'm here playing in the space. And you're not seeing that because you're on video, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to make it clear that this is, the text is clear, there's no aliasing going on here. Aside from what you'd expect to see with a font machine, right? So here I am playing around. This is just a gray box. Again, I'm just using a gray box here specifically so that way we can do quick builds and not be interrupted and see the changes as they happen, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my little dude, and I'm going to move him over here, and I'm going to move him down. And oh, okay, so it's telling me I need to check it out. This is just a reminder, this is actually a source controlled. It's working with the Perforce system in the back end, so I can check out the selected. Here we go. So I'm going to move my little duder down because it's not nice to start in the air. So there we go. I'm going to take this block and I'm going to put it here to make it a more interesting piece of a jumping puzzle. I'm going to make a cone float in the air because cones should always float in the air. And then this cylinder here should be actually, no, I don't want to check that. I want to click that, and I want to move that over there. I'm going to move that there because I like bumps in the road. Okay, so I've made those changes, and so I've done that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build my lighting briefly, just because I hate having that the red text sticking up there and waiting for me. So it's now doing that. That should be done. And okay, so I'm basically ready to play. Oh, and once again, check out, right? So I'm going to check this out as well. So I've checked out both the light map and the level file, basically. And just to reiterate, since here we are, I'm going to do a quick refresh. So verify. Okay, yep, everything is as one would expect it. Perforce and UE4 are working in conjunction, so all is right in the world. Okay, so what I'm going to do quick is I'm going to do a quick play. And so here I am. And I missed the jump because I'm a terrible player. But let's see if I can get it. Can I get that jump? Oh, it's too high. I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board. Well, you know what? I'm not very happy about that, but My day in the sun is, maybe I can jump from over here. Maybe I can turn that into a, oh, I'm a really bad player today. Yeah. Maybe I'll turn that into a bug instead of a feature. Can I get that here? Oh, and. Yeah, okay. And so it's a feature. It's not a bug. I'm going to leave it. I'm a happy person who has finished his job for the day, and I'm going to finish. So I'm out of play mode. I'm content with the work that I've done for today. I'm going to save my stuff. I'm going to save it all to source control. I'm going to say, did my work, and I'm going to submit it. And that's going to be done. And it says I've submitted it. And of course, when I do refresh, it's all done there. So again, all working in the cloud, no time in between, nice and quick and easy. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to package the project for Windows. And again, I'm going to put this in my builds. So one of the reasons I'm walking you through this is because, I mean, you're looking at a workflow that some of you are probably extraordinarily familiar with. I just kind of want you to see how natural it is for me to walk through that workflow. It's not like I'm struggling or worrying about lag between, or there's no weirdness between me and the box that's doing my work for me. It's just working. Again, I'm 400 miles from this actual piece of hardware, right? There's speed of light issues going on there. There's all sorts of stuff happening, but we're not seeing it because it's just working for me. The Teradici client is doing its job. The G4DN is super responsive. And actually, once I'm done doing the build, I'm actually going to pull up something as well that you can take a look at, which is a more interesting level, not a gray box, that we can see the G4 actually working on real graphics and real particles and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to drop into my builds directory, and I'm going to zip this sucker up. And again, I wish you could see exactly what I'm seeing, but I hope you're getting a good enough idea through the stream that it's doing a reasonably good job of demonstrating the smoothness, the ease of use. It's nothing special, right? It's just really nothing special. So let's see what I'm going to do now. Is it's actually going to take less time to upload this to S3, which is kind of hilarious. It's going to make, what is it, I think 400 meg and change or something like that? Yeah, it's about 400 meg and change. So that's up. Away we go. And now we got the zip file. I've done a very, very simple script file. All it is, it's just CLI doing an S3 upload to a bucket that I prepared for this. So it's going to pop open. It's saying it's uploading it. We'll actually know exactly when it's finished because it's going to tell us when it finished. And it's basically finished right about now. And that's how long it took to get 400 meg up to a place where our players can now get to it. And that's kind of important to me because if I want stuff to go to my players fast, if I'm doing a build, how fast is, okay, so it took X amount of time for me to do my build. How long is it going to take for me to actually make that build available to my players? Well, as soon as it gets dropped into S3, it's available for your players. Normally what I would do, I'm not actually going to distribute to the EXE to you folks, but at this point, since it's in S3, there's lots of things you can do. The thing I usually do is I've got an API gateway that I can hit with, I can do with my launcher. In a demo, I can do with Postman, but the idea is that I can hit that endpoint and I can get an expiring link to that content, right? Now, for the demo, I'm not doing anything like authentication or anything like that. But as you as a developer, what you could do is you can front that. You can front that API gateway hit with an authentication request, or what's your token, or do I know you, anything like that. And the idea is that they can then use this mechanism to get access immediately to their game, immediately to their changes. If it's a content change, you can make your content immediately available. If it's a launcher that you use to get your game to your players, you can use that, and it'll be immediately available to them. That's the faster you can do that, the faster your players are happy, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. So I'm going to drop out of this, and I'm going to drop back into Unreal. And what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to open up a different project. I'm going to pop this one open. And again, this is just specifically so that you can see the speed of how well this machinery can handle a much more complex level is really what we're looking at here, right? And what usually ends up happening is the second it lights up, I usually forget that you're all there and start playing it because it's actually just a fun level to jump around in. But you've probably seen this before. This is the shooter game that's part of the stock stuff that you can use for demos and samples and learn how to code. And this is me maneuvering through the space. It is super, super smooth for me and really enjoyable. Again, my connection today is not the best. There's nothing I have not been able to cope with, and frankly, it's been pretty freaking smooth, all things considered. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit play, and here I am. I'm jumping around like a jumped person, and I'm going to shoot some stuff, and there we go. And that's, I mean, again, is what I'm looking at is a lot nicer than what you're looking at. I would love to be able to show you exactly what is on my screen, but I'm running at 1920 by 1080, you know, full res. I'm not pulling any punches here, and I'm getting solid frame rate in play mode on a really nicely textured level. So that's as far as I usually go. I think what we're going to do is, Stephen, I think we're going to take some questions now. Oh, and additionally, I did want to stop this, and I wanted to go back really briefly to okay, so to answer your question, I saw there's a question in the field as to what kind of bandwidth I'm looking at right now. We're looking at bytes received, bytes sent. That's kind of, that should give you a good feel for what my pipe is capable of right now, right? So I think, Stephen, did you want to pick it up from here with the Q&A?
Yes, so there's hello all, there's a couple of questions. They're asking Chris about your bandwidth up and down to your house. One of the things that's probably worth explaining to them as well is the difference between...
Stephen's not with us, so I will pick up the Q&A. Excellent. Joe, as far as the up and down bandwidth of your client, that's going to be... mine varies so much on a given day because I don't have the most reliable provider on the planet. If you look at, actually, the Teradici site has a really good page to give you expectations for frame rate and resolution and what you can expect given your configuration. I'll see if I can find that before the session's over. If Stephen chimes in, then we'll be able to do a bit more on that. Sound I don't currently have working, and I actually Edgar, that's a great question. I haven't actually tried to get sound working on this. I believe oh, sorry about that. Stephen was there, and I couldn't hear him. So I'm going to break off and talk, and let Stephen talk for a second.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Chris, you were doing a good job answering the questions, but it seemed that you couldn't hear me. I don't know if anyone else could. So yeah, they were asking about your bandwidth. There are some questions about sound as well, the sound that the demo should have been creating. If you were playing the game, would you be able to hear the audio being generated on the G4 at your end? Does Teradici also stream the audio? That was one of the questions that came up. For you, Chris?
Right. Again, I haven't fully experimented with that. That's a really good question, and it's something that I probably should have checked on before now. To my understanding, based on the work that our M&E folks have done, I'm expecting the answer to that question is yes, but I can't give you a definite yes or no on that this second. I believe there's a virtual audio driver though that Teradici enables that you can use in conjunction with the G4.
And Rob has a question allowing for split input between developers. So this is one of the things that is different between the different streaming services. So if I'm understanding your question there, a designer playing the game while someone else is watching what they're doing on their stream. Both Nice and Parsec are the preferred solutions when you want to do, say, buddy coding, or one person wants to play the game and you want one or more people to be observing. That's something that I don't believe Teradici supports right now, but Nice and Parsec do. This is why we said there's a couple of different streaming solutions we're seeing people using, and there doesn't seem to be a one size fits all dominant solution that's really best for every environment. Seems like both Nice and Parsec are being used in that environment where you'd have multiple people playing watching at the same time as one person is playing. So I hope that answered your question, Rob. I'm just looking down at the other questions. Chris, could you answer that question about the build process from Lucha?
Oh, Luca, yeah, build process. Sure, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what you saw here was obviously a very workstation-centric build process. You'd use the build process you'd usually use on your local box to work here. Again, we were talking, we've integrated fast build as well as Incredibuild to leverage their clustered build processes. We don't have this in the demo right now, just for for time constraints and for simplicity. But that is absolutely something that we have working, and that we actually should have in this demo very shortly. We've been working pretty hard with Incredibuild to get that up and running, and I think fast build will be coming pretty quickly on the heels of that. Again, one of the nice things here is that there is no differentiation between the build process you're used to as far as distributed builds are concerned and the build process as you'd use it in the virtual workstation. It just happens to not be at your feet. That's really the only differentiation there.
And there's another question there about code build, code pipeline, and code deploy. We haven't seen a lot of game developers using those tools yet because they rely on the Git pipeline, and they're probably more set up, safe to say, for more of a web development pipeline than for game development. If you are using those or feel that you could use those tools, then of course they are managed services, and it's a nice way to do development in the cloud. What we were trying to focus on here, and the reason we sort of stick with a more EC2 centric environment here, is that we didn't want to try and create a new environment for you to develop your game in. We're much more interested in allowing you to move your existing environment simply into the cloud. So the work we're doing is really to try and identify, with the customers that we're talking to directly, we're working to identify what tools they have in their current pipeline, and working with them to migrate those tools into the cloud, because we don't want to take on trying to reimagine their entire build pipeline or their entire build, their entire production environment. It's really about just moving that production environment that already exists into the cloud. If you are using code build, code pipeline, code deploy, by all means, of course, they're in the cloud, and we can connect those to a build pipeline the same as we have here. There's another question here, G4 instance per developer. It's a good question. So typically, yes, for the high-end people, there would be, you'd have a G4 for each artist. Now, as far as programmers are concerned, it really depends on the graphics need of the artist and the programmer, to be honest. So, they may be running on a G4. Programmers may find that they can run on a compute-centric instance type, or a memory-centric instance type may be better for them. So the idea here is you can run Teradici on all of those, and Nice and these other systems, but really it comes down to what you need. And so that's one of the things that we're seeing people are starting to think about, is whereas typically you sort of had to provision for the max, if someone might need a really good graphics card on their machine for some of the work they did, you would have to buy them that machine and put it in the studio next to them. When you're working in the cloud, you have more freedom to change someone's hardware on almost a daily basis. So you can alter what hardware you're running on and what hardware you're streaming from based on the type of work you're going to be doing over the next period of time. And so you wouldn't always necessarily need a G4. It really depends on what kind of work you're doing. An artist, though, especially working in the game engine and with something like Max or Maya, they would probably need a G4 to themselves. Yeah.
Yep.
Another question about the Unreal Engine. No, this is not tied to one engine. You can use your own engine, anything that's, you can have G4 instances running Linux, Windows, so you can run any of those workstations. Chris, do you have anything that you want to talk about around the game engines sort of thing?
Yeah, Joe, we used Unreal because it looks great on screen and because it has a really cool visual tactile integration with Perforce. But this will work. This will work with Unity. This will work with Default. This will work with Godot. This will work with pretty much anything. It's not tied to any specific engine at all. So you have the flexibility, again, like all those other pillars, to use whatever the heck you want to use. It's all good.